My name is Jack Carleson, also known as Big Planes on YouTube, Flickr, and Instagram. And today we brought the Boeing 777-300, which is one of the largest Boeing airplanes in its current lineup. Of course, not as large as the Boeing 747 or Airbus A380, but this is pretty much the largest plane, other than the new 777s, which will be coming out soon, that Boeing pretty much sells. So this was a really exciting build. I'm glad I could bring it here to BrickFair, and I'm glad I could talk to you guys today.
Is this the largest plane build you've tackled so far?
No. So I've actually done an Airbus A380, which was about the same length as this, but definitely much wider and just larger in general. But this is, I believe, the longest plane I've done, which is pretty cool. It's over 6 feet long, which is crazy when you think about it, because it's Lego, so it probably wants to bend a lot and have some issues. So overcoming the structural problems was one of the hardest parts of building this for sure. And when we take the roof off and get inside of it, you'll be able to see the structure of the roof and exactly how this holds itself together. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to that in this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know one of the things that's always really interesting talking to you about your builds, Jack, is kind of the history of the particular plane that you choose to build and why it was important. So tell us a little bit about kind of the significance of this plane for Boeing.
Oh yeah, definitely. So this is the Boeing 777-300, so it's the longer variant, so 300ER, so just extended range, but that part doesn't really matter. It's the longer version of the 777. And the 777 was Boeing's response, in a way, to the Airbus A300, which was Airbus's initial offering into the space. And while airplanes like the Boeing 747 and later the A380, except not really to the same degree, had 4 engines, and some airplanes like the DC-10, L-1011, even 727 to a degree, were 3-engine airplanes because of ETOPS regulations. So an ETOPS regulation basically stated that a plane with 2 engines could not fly further than, I think it's about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It depends on the type of ETOPS regulation. I'm sure somebody will comment the exact number. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But basically, twin jets could not fly over long distances over the ocean. So 3-engine airplanes and 4-engine airplanes were pretty much the kings of long-distance travel. So what the Boeing 777 as an airplane really represents is the transition from 4-engine airplanes to 3-engine airplanes over to twin jets, which of course nowadays most planes you fly on are going to have 2 engines, most Boeing planes and most Airbus planes. So the 777 was really one of the first, because this was developed in the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of this was developed using computers, so that was also one of the very first airplanes to be developed mostly using computers. And this is a very large airplane. It's not quite as large as the 747, but it is a wide body, which means it will have 2 aisles. And I believe most 777s are configured in 4-3 configurations, so this is a big airplane. And this really has become one of Boeing's best sellers in the wide body fleet because of just how efficient it is. And it's actually been so successful that Boeing is planning on introducing the 777-9 and 777-10, which are the newer versions of these planes. They have new engines. I believe they're the largest engines in aviation, last time I checked. And this has really been an extremely successful airplane for Boeing, and really represents a transition from 4-engine airplanes to 2-engine airplanes, which has really gone on to define modern air travel in its current age.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff there. So talking about the build more then, it's always interesting to hear your design process. So where do you kind of start with in this particular model? Where did you start with? How did this kind of develop and come together for you?
Yeah, so this one started, oddly enough, with the fuselage. So I wanted to make sure that the fuselage was round and very strong. And there's a lot of noise in the background, so I apologize for that, of course. But round and strong, because the fuselage acts as a structural girder along the length of the plane. And the problems with some of these long airplanes is that they like to sag or kind of have a banana effect, which thankfully this one doesn't really have. So I started with the fuselage. The fuselage is a similar design, but not exactly the same as the 747 fuselage design. And so I started there, although when I really started building the plane, I started with the central wing box area, because that's, in my view, where everything sort of expands out from the center, right? So the landing gear are in the center, all the structural wing box components are in the center, and then once the wings are done, so the wings are done first, I then usually move forward towards the nose, and then after that I will finish off with building the tail. So yeah, that's typically how these things go, and I document it on my YouTube channel. And yeah, it's a really exciting build because this one posed a lot of challenges with being so large and only being a twin jet. Everything's much larger. The engines on this plane are about the same width as the fuselage on a 737, so it's a very big airplane. And most people don't really think of 777s as being huge airplanes until they actually see one and they're like, wow, that's huge. So yeah, this has been a really exciting build so far, and a little sneak peek for later on, there's actually a full interior in this. But I guess maybe before that we can talk about some of the control surfaces, since those are pretty cool as well. Give you guys a chance to slip around the side here. Watch out for the table. Awesome. So on this one, I decided to incorporate spoilers and flaps. So the flaps on this one have larger dual slotted, I believe, or yeah, they're dual slotted Fowler flaps. And these work pretty simply. Hopefully they work today. This one here slides in like this. This one slides in like this. And then it comes down like that. And of course you have the flap track here. And then the spoilers, also pretty simple. These things just fold in like so. Doesn't want to get caught. There we go. Pretty flush. And then of course I believe this is an Elevon. I'm sure, again, somebody will correct me if not. This one can go both up and down. And of course it's flush with the rest of the wing. And these outboard flaps are single slotted flaps, so these will just come up like so, like that. And then the spoiler up here, that's what it is, or air brake, depending on what you like to call it, goes down like that. And then of course, flap tracks, where they would house the mechanism for this all down below. So yeah, it's a fairly simple system. It works, it's fairly elegant, and yeah, it actually worked on camera this time, which sometimes doesn't happen. So
it looks fantastic. Now, the arrows are interesting there. So in real life, are those printed on the wing?
Yes, so that would be the escape path if you're using an emergency exit, which in this case is a full door. So it's basically marking the direction of travel, which you would leave the plane. And I'm not sure about the drop from here all the way down. That's a pretty far drop, but maybe the flap goes down, so you know, it's not quite as bad. So, you know, not too far, I guess. Most of these planes would have emergency slides, so I think you would use that door in a worst case scenario. But generally speaking, yeah, that's what those are. So I'm not exactly sure what the black lines do. I think it has something to do with lining it up at the gate. Maybe that's something somebody in the comments can mention. I actually wasn't able to figure that out when I was doing research for this plane. But yeah, this is a very interesting plane. These are, of course, very common in the airports of today. British Airways uses these on a lot of their long-haul flights. Of course, being in the name, ER, extended range, they are used on very long-distance flights. So yeah, this is really kind of the backbone of British Airways' long-haul fleet, the 777, especially since retiring the 747s.
And how about the engines? How did those come together for you?
Yeah, so the engines, I have a lot of experience building engines from some of my previous jets. These are the largest engines I've ever done on a passenger plane, so a little bit of a fun fact there. I believe these are the GE 90 engines, so General Electric engines, and yeah, these were fun to do. They're very large, so I had to take that into account. I also had to try to make them as light as possible so they don't fall off the wing. The fan blades were fun on these because I wanted to show the metallic silver leading edge of the fan blades, which is something that can be a little tricky to do, but since the fans are so large on this, I was actually able to incorporate that, which was really, really cool. So, yeah.
Do you like building at this really large scale just because you can kind of include more of those little details?
Certainly, yeah. And also, I like building at minifigure scale, so I like being able to have little people next to the plane. And I think that really just does a great job of showing how big these are, since I think a lot of times these planes, people don't really understand. They see pictures of them, maybe they see it from a distance at an airport, but then when they see a little Lego figure right next to it, it can be able to put the whole thing into perspective, because they're like, wow, look how small that figure is, look how small the door is that person walks through. And it's incredible, because these planes are massive. They're jumbo jets, essentially. Even though that title really goes to the 747, they're all very large. So I think that's something that it's a great job at explaining the scale, which is why I like to use minifigures. Yeah. But yeah, this is sort of in the name, big planes. And yeah, I build big planes.
You do a great job with it. That takes us back to the tail here. You've got this unique kind of wavy British Airways design back here.
Yeah, so usually I try to like to brick build these as much as possible. Sometimes I have to use stickers, or sometimes I will pad print it. And right now you can actually see support under the tail. You'll see in a minute or two why that's there for getting to the interior. But this plane could stand all on its own without any support, so of course that's not necessary. But yeah, the tail is brick built, and I like to brick build it as much as possible because a lot of times stickers will fade over time. They can get expensive. I don't like putting a huge sticker over such a large surface, so I really like to try to brick build things as much as possible. So yeah, that was something that I really enjoyed doing too, because it kind of lets you be a little more creative with these. A lot of this is very regimented. There's sort of one way to do it correctly because that is how it looks on the real plane. So that was something I actually had a lot of fun with doing. So definitely.
I know a lot of people wonder when they see a large Lego build like this, are there any kind of specialized elements, any one-off elements? So is this all standard Lego parts in here?
Yeah, so these are all standard Lego pieces. Some with stickers, some were painted in areas like this with the decals. I don't paint entire pieces because I like to try to stick to the color palette that Lego offers. There isn't any metal in this, there isn't anything else holding it together. It's all just the Lego. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a pain because it likes to, it's big, it's heavy. If you're not careful how you handle it, it can fall apart a little on you. But yeah, generally speaking, it's a pretty sturdy airplane. The roof is built out of probably way too many pieces, but it is extremely, extremely durable. So I'm not too worried about that falling apart. But yeah, this was a pretty fun build and really just sort of push the limits, I think, of how long you can make a Lego airplane, because this, again, over 6 feet, very long fuselage, puts a lot of strain on the landing gear. And yeah, the plane I'll be bringing next year will be up on a stand, which will be even cooler. So
can't wait to check that out. But for now, I want to dive into the interior. Yep. So we'll stop for a second here, let you take that off, and then we'll check out the inside.
Sounds good. Yep. That's all right.
So then what are the key elements here that you kind of use to keep the top on?
Yeah, so this is one of the little known secrets with this plane, is that if you just put the fuselage on top of the roof of the fuselage on top of the fuselage, because of the length of this, again being over 6 feet, it's gonna sag. And towards the end of the plane, here towards the tail, you would see a separation, right? So the way this works is essentially it's a giant girder. So you have connectors here. These are quite beefy connectors. They're Technic lift arms. They go all the way down below the floor, and they essentially anchor the roof into the floor. So there's one of these at the back and there's one of these at the front. And what this basically does is it takes the strength of the roof and it translates it to the rest of the fuselage, which stops it from sagging or warping or having any weird issues. So as we take this apart here, what I can do is actually pull out these 1x4 Technic pins. And these are pretty much what's holding the roof in place at the front and at the back. So when you do that, now this roof is loose. Without these, this whole thing would be basically falling off. So that's how I do it on this, and that's actually how I do it on most of my planes. And I've learned this the hard way over the years, that you need these types of supports in here, or else it just essentially can't hold itself together. So yeah, we'll do the one at the back here, and I'll try to slip around to the one at the front here. And of course this top element here is not even attached, but that's all right because it shows everything going on in here. Get a little bit of a sneak peek there of the interior. Same thing at the front, and this is actually a perfect time to show the structure of the roof and exactly how it's built. Again, way over-engineered. I probably did not have to put as many pieces in this as I did, but it does a really good job at keeping this strong. This is a very heavy-duty roof, and it's essentially the structural backbone of the airplane. There's one of these on the top, and there's one on the bottom. So I'll go in. I'll try not to block your camera view as I pull these out. One here, and then one here. So after you do that, I may have to open a couple doors so I can get my fingers under here. Let's see, I'm gonna try to get around at the front. I think this is the best way to do it.
The build is so wide, it's hard to reach some of these doorways and things.
Yeah. So I guess, try this. I'm gonna set it right here, so. Perfect.
There you go, incredible. Just one huge piece there. So how heavy is that?
It's quite heavy. Thankfully, it splits apart into 3 smaller pieces for transport. But when I'm taking the plane apart, it shows it comes off all as one piece because it's a little bit more intricately connected for when it gets broken down into transit. But it needs to be very strong because that's what's essentially holding the fuselage together and stopping it from sagging. So yeah, now once you do that, that basically reveals all of the inside here. And there is a lot in here. And this is one of the reasons why this plane has so many pieces. I think my estimate for this was over 20,000. So I'll have to check that, but I believe that's where it was. And I usually estimate based off of weight. So I'll actually weigh each one of these sections, divide that by the average weight of the part I think I'm using. So this one tends to skew a little smaller since there's a lot of little pieces in here, as you can see. But yeah, well, guess we'll start towards the front here. And hopefully this video doesn't end up being too long, but that's all right if it is. So we have the cockpit here. And one of the big reasons why the 777 was pretty innovative for its time was because it was a 2-pilot cockpit. A lot of the cockpits at that point were 3-pilot. You had the flight engineer, DC-10, L-10-11. So this one was a totally glass cockpit, mostly pretty much all electronics, fly-by-wire, all the fancy stuff. So you only needed 2 pilots, which again cut down on crew costs, was great. And they're all the way up here at the front. And this interior is basically accurate. There's a small things here and there that had to be changed a little bit, obviously, because LEGO's scale is not one-to-one with real life. But right here we have the cockpit, and I'll try to open this door here. Ooh, there we go. Cockpit door opens. And of course on either side here we have the forward lavatories. These are the restrooms that the crew would use, the first class passengers, and of course a small galley area up here. And I even went through the trouble of making little, try not to block your camera there, little beverage carts and food carts. So
that's amazing. I love that.
They can pull those out and serve the passengers. And this one's a little interesting because it actually has a first class section. And a lot of airlines are phasing these out because as we get further back, you'll see that the business class section is actually really good too. So first class is not as common as it used to be. But you can see these are very fancy seats. You've got little lights here. These would fold down into flat beds and get plenty of room here. Very fancy cushions, upholstery. Very fancy everything. First class.
Did you take several first class flights to research for this build?
Oh, I wish. I will be very lucky if I ever get to fly anything better than economy in British Airways.
If anyone from British Airways is watching this, Jack's here. He can build more planes. Yeah. So a couple first class flights, you never know.
Yeah, reach out to me. Maybe we can display this somewhere in the UK. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, and I always enjoy doing the interiors on these the most because it's kind of like the reward after you're done building the rest of the plane. You get to actually have fun on the inside here and detail things out and greeble and just have fun, right? It's really where you can show off the details of the airplane, even though half the time you can't see it because the roof's on it. I tried at this show to take the roof off of it so it would be a little bit more visible. But yeah, so this is the first class section here. We've got some curtains here. These are just minifigure capes. So this is something I've done for a while, but it's a great little detail on like curtains between sections. And then this right here is going to be the galley area. Of course, a couple more restrooms here. These would be the business class lavatories. So the first class lavatories are up here at the front. Business class lavatories here. Galley area here, I believe these are more of the beverage carts down here. And also these are, in case you're wondering, these are wireless contacts for the interior lights. So they're not as visible during the day because it's very bright in this room, but during World of Lights you can definitely see them, so I think that's pretty cool. And then we get to I believe these are known as Club World Suites. So British Airways has some interesting naming schemes here, but these are the Club World Suites, and these would have sliding doors. I believe these are in a herringbone configuration. I'm sure some AvGeek in the comment will correct me. Herringbone or reverse herringbone. The seats are at angles. That's what that means.
Someone who's spent more time in this section of the plane can help correct you.
I would be an expert in this, but yeah. So large section of these, lots of these seats. These are the newer seats. So British Airways has some older seats that are pretty well loved, but they're aging. So these are in a 1-2-1 configuration on the real airplane. So this is an accurate configuration. It's a little bit easier to get accurate configurations in first and business class because the seats themselves are wider. As you start getting into premium economy and economy, it's harder because the seats get narrower and narrower, as we all know. But yeah, this was a lot of fun to do. You can see that the figures actually fit inside each one of these. And these again would be sliding doors. They don't slide on this model because of the mechanism would not fit, but I tried to indicate that they are sliding doors by having them all in the open position. So it's going to be a little bit harder to share the back of the plane just because it's way back here in the table, but I'll try my best. This right here is the premium economy section, essentially. And of course, got some more lavatories here, if I can straighten them out. Right here, these are the emergency exits that we mentioned earlier in the video. Normally these would be closed during flight because you don't really need to use these. These would only be used in an emergency. But this right here is sort of where the premium cabin ends and the rest of us would probably be sitting. And yeah, so this is premium economy. Slightly larger seats, slightly more legroom, but your typical economy seat. Not a whole lot going on there, so I've got some figures in there. Having a good time. We're picking back up here again in the economy section. So right here, once you pass these curtains, we've got the bassinet seats, which actually have a couple of babies in them right now, which is kind of funny. If you watch my YouTube video, you'll know why those are there. But yeah, the economy section on this plane is all the way at the back, because obviously it's sort of an afterthought, but that's all right. But yeah, it's right now I have it in a 232 configuration, which I know it's not really what it would be in, but again, Lego figures are wider than what they would proportionally be in real life. And of course, I want to be nice to my figures. I want to give them more space. I want to give them room to stretch out. So that's why it's in a 232 configuration. Of course, right here in the center, we've got some more lavatories. A lot of lavatories on this plane because it carries a lot of people. So I guess that would make sense. But another bank of lavatories right there. And yeah, just a lot of seats, a lot of parts in these seats. So this contributes to the weight of the airplane and the total part count, which explains why there are so many parts in here. And yeah, so as we move our way to the very back of the airplane, because we'll kind of come around here, we've got another small galley area here, and of course back here, if you, maybe you can get that from the front, you can see the main galley area. So we've got all these stoves here that would open up, and again, they're mostly reheating food for the economy section, but this is sort of the main galley. This is where most of the food for all of the economy seats is coming out of, and it can be a pretty busy place on some long haul flights. So yeah, this was a detail I wanted to capture, and I'm pretty happy how I did it. And of course, going back to earlier in the video, these are the structural hard points that go all the way down to the under the floor of the airplane. So that's sort of part of the, very much part of the structure. And again, one of the things I wanted to do with this is hide the structure as much as possible, allow for a full interior, while at the same time having it hold itself together, which is pretty important. So yeah, this is the full interior of the British Airways 777. It's a big airplane, a lot of seats, a lot of different classes on this plane. And yeah, so British Airways are flying quite a few of these. They're one of the largest operators of the 777-300, which is one of the reasons why I chose to do this. Coming up in the next few years, eventually if Boeing can get their act together, you have the 777X coming out, which maybe one day I can do one of those, or maybe I'll upgrade this plane to be a 777X. I guess we'll see. But yeah, I'm really, really excited to be here at BrickFair, and I'm glad I was able to bring this airplane.
Yeah. Then you get a little kind of behind the scenes look here at how some of this comes together. So talk about kind of the back section here.
Oh, absolutely. So just for some context, the horizontal stabilizers on this plane are larger. Just get this out of here. The horizontal stabilizers on this plane are larger than a lot of regular airplanes. So these are almost the same wingspan, a little smaller, but almost the same wingspan as a 737. So quite large. And because of that, it has to have a very slight dihedral, not too much of one. The DC-10 that we did last year from BrickFair had a much more significant dihedral here, which, you know, that's one of the defining features of that. But again, getting this angle is pretty tricky, but I was able to do it with some hinge bricks, some of those wonderful Mixels joints, which have been around for a while now. And yeah, this is something that, you know, took a little bit of time, but not too long, thankfully, since I have quite a bit of experience doing this type of stuff. So yeah, this is a good one. I really enjoyed building this plane, and of course, displaying it here at BrickFair gives me an opportunity to share it with the rest of the world, to share it with attendees here, which is something I really enjoy doing.
Incredible work here. Yeah, the size of this is amazing. So when you don't have a build like this on display at a show, how do you typically display or store these at home?
Yes, so I've learned some hard lessons over the years about white airplanes. Of course, living in San Diego, there's a lot of sun, and now more recently in Florida, there's a lot of sun. So I used to display these out on tables. I've learned the hard way that when you do that, the bricks will yellow. So what I usually do now is once I'm done with a build, once I've filmed it, once I've uploaded it to my social media accounts, I'll usually box it up and have it in a safe area out that it's not in the sun. And when I come to a show like this, I'll just bring the box out and set it up at the show. Then when the show's over, it goes back into the box and back into storage. And this is great for keeping the Lego in good condition. It's great for keeping things organized, because otherwise I would lose track of everything all over the place. And some planes I do decide to display, but because this one is just so large, it's pretty difficult to display a plane that's this large. So again, British Airways, if you're listening, contact me. But yeah, this is a fun project, and this really sort of pushes the limits of how large you can make a Lego airplane. I know I say that every time I build a plane, but this one especially, being the stretched version of the 777, this was a lot of work getting it to be stable. But it worked out in the end, and I'm glad it was able to make it to the show.
Yeah. Fantastic work here. Thank you so much for taking us through the whole build and for bringing this out to the show. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you guys. I always enjoy talking to you guys at these shows, and hopefully we'll have something fun next year.
Sounds good.
Yeah.